Why do the wisest people speak the least? Think about this carefully. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone dominates the room, talking endlessly, filling every second with noise? Their words come fast, but afterward you realize they didn't really say anything meaningful. Now compare that to another person, the quiet one. They sit, they listen, and when they finally choose to speak, everyone leans in. One short sentence, one simple observation, but it carries more weight than all the noise combined. Why is that? In today's world, silence feels uncomfortable. We rush to fill every pause. We reach for our phones. We explain ourselves endlessly. On social media, silence feels like invisibility. In arguments, silence feels like weakness. But let me ask you, haven't you ever regretted speaking too quickly? Haven't you ever wished you had stayed silent instead of saying something you couldn't take back? We live in a culture that rewards noise, constant posting, constant commentary, constant chatter, and yet, history teaches us something very different. The wisest leaders, the greatest thinkers, and the most peaceful spirits are remembered, not for how much they spoke, but for how deeply they knew when not to speak. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. Today, let's explore why silence has been honored across cultures and philosophies. What science now tells us about the power of silence on our brains and emotions. How we can use silence in everyday life, at work, at home, in love, in leadership. And finally, some stories of masters and philosophers who chose silence over words, and why those moments still echo through time. Ancient philosophy and wisdom traditions. Let us begin where wisdom always begins, with philosophy. Plato once said that silence is the soil where ideas grow. He believed that to speak was sacred, and therefore silence must always come before speech. He often retreated into quietness because he understood that wisdom takes shape in the pauses, not in the rush of words. His student Aristotle took it further. He taught that a person's character is revealed in their ability to control their tongue. To him, silence was discipline, a shield that protects us from regretful words. Aristotle believed that those who master silence master themselves. In Eastern philosophy, Lao Tzu gave us one of the most famous lines ever written. He who speaks does not know. It does not need to shout. Wisdom waits. Wisdom listens. Wisdom speaks only when it must. The Buddha too often chose silence. When asked questions that could not be answered with words, he simply remained quiet. To his followers, this silence was not avoidance. It was the highest teaching. He was inviting them to reflect, to discover truth within themselves. The Christian mystic Saint Francis of Assisi once said, "Preach always, and when necessary, use words." In Islam, silence is praised as a form of worship, a way to keep the heart pure. And the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." From east to west, from ancient Greece to ancient China, from temples to palaces, the greatest teachers knew, silence is not the lack of an answer. Silence is often the answer itself. Psychology and science of silence. But let's step into the modern world. What does science say about silence? Neuroscientists have discovered that silence literally changes the brain. It activates something called the default mode network, the part of the brain that processes emotions, consolidates memories, and helps us understand ourselves. In 2013, a groundbreaking study revealed that just 2 hours of complete silence can trigger the growth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, the area responsible for learning and memory. Think about that. Silence repairs the brain. Prayer, mindfulness, all forms of cultivated silence reduce cortisol. People who practice just 10-15 minutes of silence daily report lower anxiety, sharper focus, and even increased creativity. Haven't you noticed this yourself? Your best ideas rarely come in the middle of a noisy argument or a chaotic meeting. They come when you requiet during a shower, on a walk, lying awake at night. That's silence at work. Silence creates the space where creativity breathes. Even in relationships, silence matters. Psychologists remind us that most people don't actually listen, they just wait for their turn to reply. But when you bring silence into a conversation, you create space to actually hear. Silence is not absence, it is presence. And consider leadership. Many CEOs and leaders take silent retreats, not because they're avoiding work, but because silence sharpens their clarity. When you remove the noise, you hear what truly matters. Science is proving what ancient wisdom already knew. Silence is not emptiness, it is healing for the mind, for the heart, even for the body. Practical applications in life. So, how can silence transform your daily life? In communication, imagine someone insults you. Your instinct is to fire back, but if you stay silent, calm, composed, that silence is louder than any insult. It shows dignity. It shows strength. In negotiation, silence is a secret weapon. Make an offer, then stop talking. The silence becomes uncomfortable, and the other side will often reveal more than they planned. Silence creates leverage. In conflict, words spoken in anger can cut deeper than knives. Silence prevents those wounds. It gives you time to breathe, to choose a better response. Sometimes love is not found in words, it is found in restraint. In parenting, a child who makes a mistake doesn't always need immediate correction. Sometimes a parent's quiet presence teaches more than scolding ever could. Silence can be discipline wrapped in love. In leadership, great leaders don't just talk, they listen. Their silence makes people feel heard, and when they finally do speak, their words carry authority. Even in art, silence is powerful. In music, it asks the pause between the notes that gives the melody meaning. In painting, it asks the empty space that gives balance to the image. Silence. Silence in every form of stress. Remember, silence is not your weakness. Silence can be your greatest ally. Story illustrations. Let me share a few stories. A Zen master was once insulted harshly by a student in front of a large crowd. The people waited for his reply for his defense, but instead, he remained silent and simply smiled. At first, the student laughed, thinking he had won, but as the silence grew longer, the crowd turned, not toward the student, but toward the master's calm presence. Soon, shame replaced arrogance. That day, silence taught louder than words ever could. Another story comes from Socrates. When accused unjustly, he often chose silence over defense. Why? Because he believed truth needs no defense. The more you argue, the weaker truth appears. His silence forced others to reflect long after the moment passed. And then there's Gandhi. Every week, Gandhi took a vow of silence for one full day. People would come to him with problems, urgent matters, even crises, and he would simply remain silent. Why? Because he believed silence was his way of renewing strength. It was in silence that he connected with truth. And maybe you've felt this too. Think of a time when someone hurt you. Instead of shouting back, you stayed silent. That silence carried dignity, self-respect, and strength. Sometimes, silence says what words never can. So, what have we learned? Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. It is the pause that brings clarity, but silence has its own language. A language that speaks directly to the heart without sound. So let me ask you, in your life, do you use silence as a weapon, as a shield, or as a gift? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you seek wisdom every week, subscribe and join this journey with us. Because in the end, in silence, we find truth.